Welcome to Widow Too Soon. This is Michelle Bader Eversole. I am sitting not with Mark. He is busy, I believe, out of town for 4th of July weekend. So I'm sure he's having a wonderful time with Tina and the kids. And so I'm excited to do this interview today. So let's see. Usually Mark and I do like, let's catch up on what's been going on, but I don't really have a lot. We recorded a few days ago and I'll just save that for when he's back next week and we'll talk about this. So we're going to get right into our episode today. I'm very excited to be sitting down across the country on Zoom with, tell me if I say this right, Kristen Latas? Is that right?
Lattas, yep.
Lattas.
Just like the fence.
Okay, I should have asked you before.
Differently. No,
I
that's
always
totally
forget
fine.
to ask people, but we're really big on being authentic. So this is
that's what I love about you guys.
Oh yeah. So I'm so excited to hear from you, but I'm always curious. How did you find our podcast before we get started?
I lost my husband just this past January 8th, and it was super lonely. I was on the remote island, a big island of Hawaii, 6,000 miles from my family. It was all by myself. And I actually started searching for grief podcasts because I wanted to hear voices, like somebody talking at night.
Yeah.
Like the house was quiet. It just felt so lonely. I mean, so I started with grief. I found a couple grief podcasts. I went through those. And then I realized all of a sudden that I'm a widow. I just suddenly realized, I should look for that. So then I started looking for widow podcasts and I found a couple and they didn't really connect with me. And then I found your widow goals one.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah. And that was like just exactly what I needed. It was where I was because I had just lost him.
Yeah.
And, just going through it day by day. And the one you said about you were chosen. I mean, that just was like, hit me.
Wow.
So I did that. And then I found your Widow Too Soon. And I just loved it because you guys are real, totally real, but you also like randomly sing 90s songs,
right?
And, go down rabbit holes.
Oh, so much.
Love that. No, I love that. It's like, I can laugh. I can actually like laugh and, and still be grieving, but it just was great. And at night, like I said, it was just a blessing. Yeah.
Well, thank you. We love to hear these stories. And I mean, because it just started with me and Mark, like, let's start a podcast, really more me pushing it. And I think we were telling our last guest, I don't know if it was off air or on here, but I'll share it again, like how we used to do the podcast. Like it would have to be like bullet points all written out. He speaks for 5 minutes. I speak for 5 minutes. And then I think it was like episode 10 or 11. He's like, I'm just going to wing it today. I was like, no, we can't do that. But then we realized we could. And so it is more authentic because we don't have all these notes anymore. We just generally think of a topic and then we just start talking and the two of us can definitely talk. So
right.
That's kind of how it was born. But enough about us in the podcast. I want to hear from you. So I love for our listeners to hear your whole story, this journey. If you want to start with like how you met your husband, a little bit about like your marriage, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. So we met actually back in 1987 on Maui, Lahaina, Maui. And I was 16. He was 26. He was living there. And I had just flown in with my family. Every once in a while, my grandparents would, instead of Christmas presents, they would take us all to like a location. We went to Antigua one year, and then the second one was Hawaii. So we all flew in, and it was too late to go to the ocean. So the resort the development had a pool right on the ocean. So we're like, let's all go there. So it was my grandparents, my aunt, my mom, my cousin, and I. We all go to the pool, and guess who was there? John, my future husband. Super tan, tall, surfer looking guy. And I was like, oh my gosh.
And how old were you at this point?
I was 16.
Oh, you're young.
I could tell he was older. I didn't know how old. It turned out he was 10 years older, but
oh wow.
I know. So it was all very exciting for me. I was like a teenager.
Right.
But anyway, it was a small pool deck and I had to like walk. We all had to like file right by him.
Yeah.
And so we filed by him and I was like, oh my gosh. And went across the pool, sat in lounge chairs, and my grandmother's like, he's cute. Oh my gosh, he's so cute. And I was like, oh my gosh, please keep it together.
That's funny.
Yeah. So anyway, he got in the pool, he started swimming laps. And I think my mom was like, oh, go swimming. So I did because I love to swim. So swimming right next to him, he accidentally bumped into me in the pool and was like, oh, sorry. And oh, it's okay.
Nice move.
Yeah, I know. And that was like it. That was the extent of it. But So then he left, and then my family and I left, and our condo that we rented had a bicycle. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to go out for a bike ride. And I went around, I was looking for him, and
Yeah.
I saw him, and he was walking, and it turned out he had been walking around looking for me too.
Oh, how
So anyway,
cute.
yeah, it was cute, but I drove by, I didn't know what to do. So I drove by on
Hmm.
my bike, and I rode by him, and he goes, hey, wait. And I said, who, me? And he's like, yeah. So
So
anyway,
cute.
yeah, it was cute. So we were just kind of connected, and he had to work and stuff. But he took me snorkeling and with turtles, and I mean, we just had a great week
Oh.
together. Yeah, it was really fun. It was super. We had a connection. I was devastated to go home back to high
Hmm.
school, but yeah, we kind of kept in touch a little bit. We wrote letters, but he
Sweet.
wanted to come see me, but it was just felt too adult. 10 years
Yeah.
difference when you're
That's a lot
16.
when you're 16.
It
Yeah.
was a lot, yeah. So lost touch, and then 7 years later, I got a call from my grandmother on the answering machine. She says, "Remember John Latas from Hawaii?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Well, he found my number in his old address book, and I didn't want to give him your number, but here's his number in case you want to call him.
7 years
Yeah,
passed
7 years.
and she had it and gave it to you. Good job,
Yeah,
grandma.
I
That's
know.
awesome.
I know. So, yeah, so it was a more appropriate. I'd gone to college. I was
Yeah. You're older.
24. He was
Yeah.
34. So I was like, better. Okay. So we reconnected. I was in LA. He was in Fresno. So it's kind of long
Okay.
distance, but he was a pilot. So he could fly
Oh,
down. He could jump seat for free. So we'd see each
yeah.
other every 2 weeks. And it all happened pretty fast. We reconnected on like Memorial Day, and then October we were engaged and married
Wow.
January 7th. Yeah. So it's just kind of like we knew, and
Yeah.
yeah, so it was great. I mean,
Wow.
yeah.
That's a beautiful story. That's one I've
Thank
never heard
you.
before. Like
I
lost touch for
know.
7 years and then back together. So what was it like when you first like saw each other? Like how did that happen? How did you like actually see each other again? Where did that happen?
Yeah, so he was from Hermosa Beach, California, and he had
Mm,
borrowed a friend's house. And I was living in like Burbank, I guess. And I just
mm.
drove and met him, and I was nervous. And
Yeah.
yeah, he had a really nice car. I had I think it was a 280Z or something, but it was kind of beat up. And then he walked out with like jeans and socks. I don't know. It was just really surreal, but it was just
Uh-huh.
also really exciting. And
Yeah.
nervous. In fact, I had a secret code with my roommate. I'm like, I'm going to call you. And if I say, everything's going fine, then you don't have to worry or something. We had
Yeah.
like a code. Yeah.
That's
But
cute.
everything was fine. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Joel and I when were just talking about this because we went to the same restaurant. We met again at Applebee's with all of our kids when he flew out here for the first time like a year and a half ago, almost 2 years. And we were just talking about that moment and how weird it was because we hadn't seen each other in over 20 years.
Wow.
And then seeing each other again for the first time and how like surreal that was. So I can relate somewhat in that feeling of seeing
Yeah.
somebody from like a long time ago. But anyways, let's go back to
Yeah.
your story.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's
um,
like you have these alternate lives, and then they kind of come back together, and it's like, this
yes.
is weird.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay,
Hmm.
so you got engaged, you got married, and
Hmm.
then where'd you guys live? What was life like?
Yeah, we lived in California for a few years. We loved warm weather. We were in Northern
Hmm.
California, so it was pretty
Okay.
cold, but we were, broke and working, and John was a flight instructor at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, we went to visit the same grandmother. She was in Naples. Actually, no, she took us all on a trip to the Bahamas.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, this is a couple years after we were married, and we went there with our family, and we were like, we love this tropical weather. We love water. We
Mm,
just love this. And she was living in Naples, Florida at the time, which is like Southwest warm water, tropical basically. And we're like,
yeah.
what if we move there? We can be close to her. We can keep an eye on her. So that was our first major move. We'd both grown up in California. He had
Yeah.
traveled a lot, but so we did that. We just sold everything, but we couldn't buy a house in California either. It was so expensive. So we bought our first house in Florida, like a mile from the beach. And
Mm,
so it was a good move. It was hard to leave, my mom and stuff, but
yeah.
yeah, so that kind of started our adventure. And we stayed in Florida until my grandmother passed away in 2012.
Mm,
So that was in 1998 when we moved. So we stayed there a while, got to keep an eye on her and be with
hmm.
her and kind of help her. So that was
Hmm.
great. And then after that, we decided we were ready for an adventure. So we had 2 Florida houses, we sold them and started moving because John was a pilot. He could live anywhere there was
Right.
an airport.
Yes.
a major airport. So we're like, let's take
Mhm.
advantage of this. We don't have any kids. We're adventurous. So we went to Boulder, Colorado for a year and a
Oh, okay.
half, and then we went to Tucson for a year and a half. We spent a little time in the Pacific Northwest, like a
Oh,
summer.
nice. What
Yeah.
where I'm just curious where
Yeah,
you're.
we spent like a month in Portland, Oregon,
Okay,
and
that's
then a
right
month.
next to me.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. And then a
Mhm.
month in Seattle.
Okay. Yeah,
So
so
we
I live like 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes from Portland. So,
Oh yeah, we
yeah.
loved it. It was so different, and I mean, we
Mhm.
considered staying there longer, but it was hard to find a place that we wanted to rent. So,
Yeah.
and I had been missing Florida, and we had visited St. Augustine, which is on the northeast, kind of total
Yeah.
opposite end of Florida. But it's a surf town. It's a college town. There's lots of live music, lots of diversity, and everything. And um, I was like, what if we go back there? And he was shocked. He's like, really? But he did. He was like always up for an adventure, which is
Nice.
great. And the beaches are beautiful up here. Lots of surfing and stuff, like I said.
Yeah.
So we did that. We moved here and we stayed here for 5 years, which it was a long time considering we kept moving.
Yeah.
And we really liked it. And I was ready to buy a house at that point again, but he wasn't ready. And we had considered maybe moving to the US Virgin Islands or renting, but we couldn't really get our health insurance down there. And I said, well, what about Hawaii? And so we prayed about it. We did research and we could get health insurance, affordable health insurance. And we're just like, oh my gosh, we
Wow.
prayed about it for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we're like, you know what? We've always wanted to go back to where we met. We've never made it.
Yes.
I thought we were going to visit there, but let's go and move, and we'll live there for a year and travel to the island, see where we met. So we just went for it. It was like right after, like, COVID was still happening when you can only travel within the US. So, but we were
Okay.
able to move there. It was scary telling my family because it's so far away, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we did it. They're used to us being crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did. It's hard. It was hard, a hard move. But it was so wonderful. We've ended up, God blessed us with like the best landlords up on the North Shore of Oahu, which is where all the big surf contests are.
Right.
And that was a dream of John because he grew up surfing with his brothers in
Oh,
California. And that was on his bucket list to see that,
right.
So we got to do that.
Nice.
Did that for a winter, and we got to snorkel. And I mean, shortly after we got settled there, we were on the beach and we were in chairs in the shade. And he said, oh, I want to live here for the rest of my life.
Wow.
And I said, yeah. And I was like, oh, we can actually, like, we love this place. We can actually buy a house and he's not going to be bummed about it. And it was just, it felt like the right thing. And we didn't know how short it was going to be.
Right.
But we really loved it. We had a great year and a half. And I'm so happy we didn't know about what was coming because we got to really enjoy it. We took a year, went to all the different islands there and kind of thinking, in the back of our mind, where can we afford to buy a house?
Right.
And ended up on the Big Island. Before that, I mean, right before the Big Island, we did go back to Maui. We stayed in the same development where we met. We recreated our only photo. So it was really special. We went to the pool and that we met at. It was crazy. Yeah. But that was like 35 years later.
Wow.
So then we went back to the Big Island. Was just kind of looking at houses, found one that we both really liked. I didn't really want to change islands, but it was a lot more affordable.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't think so. Let's just wait. And John got really down and quiet. And that really wasn't like him because he didn't really want to buy a house that much. He liked renting. And for a few days, I was like, oh, well, it's okay. I mean, I really could see us living there. And, we're always up for an adventure. And so he just brightened up. And so this was like August of 2022.
Okay.
In the meantime, he had this hard thing behind his belly button. And he just thought it was an infection. So he spent like a month getting like different creams for it. And I didn't really think anything of it. I actually thought it was like a hernia because it was hard. Yeah. And finally I said, well, why don't you go to the dermatologist? And he said, oh, that's a good idea. So he went, and the dermatologist said, I think that might be a Sister Mary Joseph nodule. which we had no idea what that was.
That sounds made up.
I know it does. And it was, I know, like exactly like what? And it doesn't sound bad. It sounds like a good thing. I don't know.
Oh, Sister Mary,
Yeah.
just what?
Yeah.
Never
So I
heard
guess
that.
it was named after a nun back in the
Okay.
1800s who discovered that people who had this didn't live very long.
Oh.
So he sent me the article, John sent me the article the next day. And it was like a late stage cancer,
Oh
especially
no.
pancreatic cancer. Yeah. And I said, I just don't think you have that. You're not, I would think late stage cancer, you would be having symptoms.
Yeah.
He had no symptoms, anyway. So immediately we're like about to close on the house. We're 95% packed up. And, so the last 2 weeks we're going to the hospital, getting scans, getting blood work or whatever. And we're driving back from after the scan, and it takes about half an hour to get home. And he gets an email. He's like, "Oh, I got the results." And I said, "Oh, let's just wait till we get home to look at them." He goes, "Okay." And then a minute later, he like goes, "I'm gonna look at it." And I'm driving, right? And he says, "Oh, it's what I was most afraid of. And it's a mass on the pancreas." And I just started crying immediately. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, do you want me to drive?" I'm like, "No, I can drive. I just don't want you to have that." It was just, we both couldn't believe it. So anyway, it just started this whole flurry of, he has a good physician friend who has just went and started doing all this research. He can get genetic testing, all these things we had to do, and decide, are we going to go through with this house?
Right.
So it was just a lot going on, and it was just a move in 2 weeks. And at that time, we had found there was a really good cancer center really close to our Big Island house, and a good oncologist. We talked to him, and John was planning to get treatment. And I left it kind of up to John, and at the end he said, "I just don't want to die in this house where we were." It was a wonderful location, but super noisy, real dense with neighbors. So, and the Big Island house was just beautiful. You could just hear wind in the trees and wild chickens and coqui frogs. And it was just unbelievably beautiful. And I said, "Okay, let's go. Whatever you want, we'll do." So we did. And honestly, I thought he would have a couple years. He had zero symptoms. And then we got over there. It was really hard. We did it. And then about a week into it, right before he was start treatment, he said, "I really don't think I want to do the treatment." We did more research, and the side effects were just going to be horrible. He wouldn't be able to go snorkeling. He couldn't eat ice cream. I mean, it's just right. And I said, "Whatever you want, I support." Right. And it was going to be hard for him to see him instantly sick, because he was still doing everything. Yeah. Yeah. And he just brightened up. He was full of peace and joy. And, had a lot of faith. And we had like 3 good months. We got to snorkel, we got to hike. He was definitely slowing down. For Thanksgiving, we went to a resort just because I was getting kind of depressed and sad, at this point. And the whole Big Island house for me felt sad. But so we went to a resort overnight, we got massages, treated ourselves, and I was like, "Oh, act like nothing's happening. It feels good." Right. And he came out and he said, "I think that's my last massage. It's just too painful." He really didn't complain, but things like that he would say, and I would be like, "Oh boy, okay." And then a couple of weeks after that, we flew to Oahu and saw some friends for the weekend, and it was so great. My heart was full. We saw everybody and went to church, and we came back, and he said, "I think that was my last plane ride. It was just too uncomfortable." And I was like, wow, I just don't know these things until you tell me, and I'm glad you tell me. Yeah. And then shortly after that, he said, "I think I have to stop driving." And it became too uncomfortable for him to even ride in the car. But I mean, he was a trooper. He went to Christmas Eve service, and I took him to YPO Valley Lookout, and we did our last selfie. We didn't know it was our last one, but I think he did a lot of things for me too. So anyway, we had an appointment with his oncologist January 5th, which is a Thursday. And I was kind of nervous, and I didn't ask a timeline, but we were walking out, and I said, "Do you have any sense of like timing?" And the doctor said, "His heart and lungs are very strong. So I think 2 to 3 months." And John was in a lot of pain at that point. He had started morphine, and he had started one fentanyl patch. And the next day was Friday. and his pain was like a 10 out of 10. And so I called hospice. They said, let's add him on one more fentanyl patch. And so he got that. Our pastor from the Big Island and a friend came up and prayed with him. And I mean, John was, strong, and he swept the patio for them and, all that. And then the next day, January 7th was our 28th anniversary.
Wow.
And yeah, we woke up and it's like, oh, happy anniversary, you made it. I just really wanted him to make it to that.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, happy anniversary. But I don't think it really connected. I think the medicine was, I was losing him already.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really sad. It was just a lonely day, but because he was sleeping a lot. But that morning, he did have a Zoom call with his men's group from Oahu and the pastor, and he had to do it from bed. But I'm so happy he got to do it. I mean, he remembered everybody's name, and he's like, I've been praying for your son. And people couldn't believe that they were remembering, people he hadn't even met, but he was praying for them. So he was such a trooper. Yeah. So after that ended, he's like, are we done socializing?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, we're done socializing, honey. Yeah. So, and that day, he didn't really leave his room. I think the medication was just too strong, and I just kind of took care of him and as best I could. And then he went to sleep, and he said, don't go to sleep because I'm scared, and I'm like, okay. So, I stayed awake, and I did eventually kind of fall asleep, but I would wake up and hear him breathing and stuff. And so the next morning was Sunday the 8th, and he was breathing, and I said, oh, honey, do you want some oxygen? And he woke up and he said, oh yeah, I do. So he was drenched, and I got a wet towel and I wiped his face, and he said, oh, that feels so good. And then he went to sit up to get the oxygen, and he just passed out. Oh. And yeah, he just never woke up again after that. But I'm glad I got to speak with him, and I'm glad he knew I was there. I'm glad he didn't go in the night, and I've been wondering, was he looking for me? So I mean, I could tell he was still breathing, but he was doing the breathing where, it's like soon. Yeah. I texted our families, and they were on with me, and I called hospice, and they told me what to do. And I said, are you guys coming? And they said, no, we're not. We don't come until after he passes.
What?
Yeah.
That's such a different experience than I had.
Yeah. And it was like 6:30 in the morning on the Big Island on a Sunday. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay. I didn't know any different.
Wow. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. It was weird. And so, but I didn't know that. I just like, okay, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, they had me put some stuff under his tongue to help with his breathing. And then he just, his breathing slowed. And my family was texting me. I may have even been talking to some of them. I can't remember. But they were lit candles, and they were with me, from far away. Right. And so eventually he passed, and I was holding his hand, singing Goodness of God by Bethel, and I was just crying. But, it's how I wanted it. I wanted to be with him, but it was also super traumatic, and sad, and I had these friends. We really didn't know very many people on that island, but we'd been going to church there, and this older couple had adopted us once they found out. And I texted them and said, John went to be with Jesus. And they said, do you want us to come? And I said, no, I'm okay. And they said, we're coming. And, and they just came. Yeah. And I'll just never, ever forget that. And I was so happy. So they came, and they just stayed with me, and they saw John, and they were just so cool about the whole thing, remembering him. And they stayed with me until hospice came, and it took hospice like 2 hours, and yeah. Wow. And they finally came, and then it was Sunday, and they were supposed to teach Bible study. I'm like, you guys go, hospice is here. So they went and taught their Bible study, and hospice came, and they were nice. She was great. I mean, and then they called the mortuary. The mortuary was wonderful. They didn't cover him up or anything like that. So it looked like he was going on a ride down to Hilo in the back of a van. I mean, he was laying down, but his face, you know what I mean? It was like, his last ride. Yeah. Wow. They were super sweet. And then Gloria, she came back and brought me a salad. So I had some food. So Yeah, I couldn't really eat, but
Wow. I'm so
yeah,
sorry that you had to go through that alone.
thank you.
Like
Yeah,
that
it
to
was.
me would be the hardest part. And our hospice experiences are so different. They came to be part of it. And
That's kind
like,
of what I thought.
yeah,
Yeah,
so I'm not sure what that's about. Like my actual hospice nurse was out of town, but she
right,
actually had given me her cell phone number. So I was on the phone with her, but then the actual, like whoever was on duty came to our house and he gave us
right,
space and everything, but he was the one who came in and pronounced him dead and
right.
everything. So I'm sorry. Like my biggest fear was being alone and I was alone for part of it. But
Yeah,
it sounds like God gave you like a supernatural peace.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, like I said, it was the way I wanted it. I wanted to be with him. I wanted to be holding his hand and singing. And I just mainly wanted to make sure he wasn't looking for me and
Right.
he just seemed to pass out and kind of, so, and I know he was ready. He was ready
Yeah.
to go. I mean, he was reading a lot about heaven and,
Wow.
definitely in the word a lot. Yeah. So, but
Wow.
it was,
So
yeah,
what were those first few days and weeks like for you?
they were really excruciating. Yeah. Really
Yes.
hard, really hard. It's just, you don't know what's one they say you don't know until you know, and it really is like that. I mean,
True.
I was like pretty strong. I was like kind of the strong one and
Yeah.
throughout because you kind of need to be.
Yeah.
And even through Christmas, I wanted to try and be as uplifting as I could. And um, John even said, he said, I'm trying to look at it like not like it's our last Christmas, but like we get one more Christmas together,
Mm,
and so I tried to do that too. But um, yeah, I mean, it was just, like I said, lots to do, lots of decisions. I didn't know really what I was going to do.
right.
But God kind of worked everything out. His best friend from high school was already going to be coming to Oahu at the end of January.
Oh,
I'm
great.
like, okay, great. Let's do the service then. And
Yeah.
John's brother and family, one of his brothers could fly out. And so it all kind of started working. And the North Shore, our Oahu church, just really rallied. And I said, all I want is for this to be live streamed because there's so many people. My
Mhm.
family can't make it,
Right.
my people have had surgery or whatever. And so they
Yeah.
got it together. I had a lady who did the flowers for me and
Mm,
ladies did food for me. And I mean, if I'd been on the same island, it would have been so much easier, but I was on a different island.
right.
And so it was all coordinating. I did the slideshow, by myself. I did all that by myself, which was
Hmm.
hard, but I'm glad I did it because I wanted it to be perfect,
Hmm.
and so
Wow.
anyway, a couple of weeks later, we flew over for the service. That was beautiful. It was like I couldn't have asked for better.
Wow.
And my family was on it live. It was kind of hard to find the link, but they found it, and it's had like over 470 views or something now. So
Wow.
a lot of people have seen it, and so it's such a blessing
Yes.
for me. Yeah.
So after I find it hard, the hardest as I work with new widows and my experience after the service is over. It's like for me, it was like, oh, this gives me a purpose. I'm planning for this. And ours was so extended because of COVID. Like he died in May and the service was in August. We did have a graveside service first, but only 10 people could come. But by August, we
Right.
did it outside. Everybody could come. But, anyways, I felt like I had a purpose. And then I remember after everybody left, I was like, what now? Did you
Yeah.
have that same experience or what was it like for you?
I did. I mean, I was so kind of amped up getting ready for the service. And
Yeah.
then the service was beautiful. I mean, it wasn't even really that sad. I was just
Right.
so
That's how it felt.
happy. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
to be around everyone, celebrating his
Mm-hmm.
life and seeing everyone. And then I flew back to the big island and I was worried about it. And I could feel the darkness kind of settling on
Mm.
me, the loneliness.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely like, oh no, it's like I'm alone. And I had a big mountain because I knew I wasn't gonna stay there.
Yeah.
So I knew I wanted to put the house up for sale, sell all the furniture. I mean, I just had a lot to do, obviously, plus all of the, paperwork and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I just put myself into that. I had to go through his things,
Yeah.
decide the brothers want this and, all that. He
Yeah.
didn't leave me with a lot. He said, I don't want you to have to touch one piece of paper, and so he did a
Wow.
lot for me.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but I found a journal, just a random journal he had written, and seeing his
Mm.
writing was like so precious. So I have that.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. To this day, I still have like random like pieces of paper that has his writing that I just can't
Yeah.
throw away.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
his
Like
writing.
recipes or
Uh-huh.
scriptures. I know. Exactly. It just
Mhm.
makes me feel connected. Yeah.
Now, did you
Yeah.
have to work also at
I
this
didn't have
time?
to work. We were both
Oh,
retired. He retired
okay.
early. Yeah, he retired early, thank goodness. So he was 62 when he died, but
Okay.
he wanted to retire at like 53. I think that was around when
Oh,
he retired.
nice.
Yeah, and thank goodness he did because we got to
Right.
have this time,
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so when he retired, he got lonely, and so he's like, "Why don't you stop?" I'm like, "Okay." So
Yes.
yeah, we got to do stuff. So yeah,
That's
thankfully I didn't have to worry about that.
that's so great.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the things that helped you? Like, do you have specific verses or songs, or just like what helped you get out of that dark place that we're all in those first few weeks?
Yeah. Definitely listening. I'm not like doing this to promote you guys, but definitely your podcast
Oh, thank you.
for sure. Because it would just be so quiet and lonely at night
Mm.
where I was. I mean, I was up, they call it the cloud forest. I was in the lower levels of it, but
Oh.
it's remote. I mean, we didn't have mail service, we didn't
Oh,
have
wow.
trash service. Yeah, it was like
Oh my
remote.
goodness.
Yeah, so I knew I wasn't going to stay there myself. But
Yeah.
anyway, so it was just lonely, and all my family were asleep. It was a time because of the times
Yeah.
difference. Yeah, so having you guys listening to you was just that helped me a lot. So I
Oh,
would
wow.
say, yeah, definitely that. What else helped me? Let me see. I think I may have written some stuff down. Definitely grief. I have a great grief counselor through
Oh,
hospice care.
good.
Yeah, and
Okay,
she
good.
actually ended up being from Tennessee. And it
Oh,
was
like
like
Mark.
yeah, I know, like the first Southern accent I'd heard in Hawaii. And it
Yeah.
was such a comfort, instantly comforting for me. I mean, I grew up in California, but in Florida, you hear a lot of Southern
Yeah.
accents.
Uh-huh.
And it just felt like home. And she actually turned out to be a Christian too. And so we connected, and we still like we do, now we're doing a session like once a month.
Oh,
So
that's
she helped me a
awesome.
lot. And then she ran a grief group every two
Okay.
weeks. And so
Oh,
you could
good.
be with other people that were going through it. And that just helped me so much. I mean, just to have, I felt like they were little islands where I just have to like get to Tuesday, get to
Yeah.
Monday, because that's this. And, every day I'd try to have an island that I could just make it to there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because I didn't realize you were such what we call a baby widow, like
Oh,
less than a
yeah.
year, that you're only since January and you seem to be doing so great. What do you think? What do you think is like the thing that's really helped you? Not like the specific song or this or that, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what,
Yeah.
just so our listeners can like learn from you.
Oh, wow. I mean, definitely leaning on God. There was just a
Yeah.
lot of nights and a lot of weeks where I felt like that's all I had was
Right.
God and
Oh yeah.
I felt so close to him.
Uh-huh.
Um, one of my scripture verses, like I felt like it was my foundational verse, was like Luke 1:37, for no word from God will ever fail. And that just
That's
like, I
good.
was like, no word from God will ever fail. Look at all the promises he has. Jeremiah 29:11, I mean, that's a promise. It's not
Yeah.
going to fail. Just so many. I mean, I could go on and on. So that for me, and I couldn't read the Bible. I couldn't read at all. I still can't really. I can listen. But what I did was I would have a scripture verse that I liked, I would put on an index card, and I would read a couple, however many I felt like reading in the morning and at night. And
Mm,
sometimes it would only be one that just spoke to me, just to remind
yeah.
me. And a lot of them I got from you guys. I mean, the one about
Oh, great.
collecting the tears in the bottle,
Oh, yeah.
I had never heard that one. And I just shared that with my grief group here in St. Augustine. And I don't think a lot of them had heard of it.
Hmm.
So that's a favorite. I did have a time like John asked me before he passed, he said, would you rather be in your position or my position? And I said,
Mm,
oh, I don't feel like I'm ready to die yet. So I guess
right.
I'd rather be in mine. And he's like, well, I understand, um, and then after he passed, it changed. And
Yeah.
I felt like, no, and I wanted to tell him I was wrong. I don't want to be here without you,
Right.
and I just wanted to tell him that, you were right. I was wrong. And so for that, it wasn't like I was suicidal, but the pain was too much. It was
Yeah.
too hard to do everything I had to do, not have him there to help me or talk to me. And there was a verse, Deuteronomy 30:19. I have set before you life, now choose life. And I just knew I had to choose life. I just had to keep going. You know, it was going to be really, really hard days, but someday I'm going to be looking back on this and
Mm.
just get through today. Just get through today. You know, that was kind of,
Wow.
yeah,
That's so great because I do see such strength. And what I've noticed about you is you have taken steps. So the biggest misconception in grief is time heals all wounds, it'll be better. Well, there is some, like, the intensity is not as much. You have to take steps, and you got a grief counselor, you go to a grief group. Like, that's huge. You found community, you found our podcasts. Like, you are doing what it takes. Because when I see
right.
people stuck, it's normally because they haven't taken any steps,
Yeah.
and so here you are, how many months
It'll
now?
be 6 months, July
Okay.
8th. Yeah.
Wow. 6 months.
Yeah.
Wait,
I know.
so did he pass away on your anniversary, or
No, the day before. So January 7th was our anniversary. He died January 8th.
okay. Well, I'm so thankful you had that day though, even
Me
if you didn't
too.
fully
Me
understand.
too.
That's
I
really,
just, yeah, I just wanted to make it. I'm like, I want to make it. I just want to say we
yes,
had 28 years. Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
here you are, not even 6 months later, doing good. What is life like for you now? What are you doing? Yeah, just share with us what you do now, and like,
Yeah. So much has happened. Okay. I'll go fast, but I sold my house on the
that's
Big
fine.
Island,
Okay.
sold all my furniture. I could only ship flat rate priority boxes was the cheapest way. I did 50 of those,
Oh, wow.
shipped them to a friend in St. Augustine. And then spent 2 months trying to find a house to buy.
Okay. Is your
That
family like the family you
the
grew up with? Are they in?
family, no, but we lived here for 5 years. So we have a ton of
Okay.
friends. I have a lot of
Okay.
like activities I can jump
I was gonna
into.
say, why did you choose that town?
I
Because you lived
know.
there before
We
and
did, yeah, 5 years. And
okay.
I just used to belong to a French group and I can go back there and I had just felt more like home,
Okay.
And
Mhm.
yeah, my family's a little bit spread out and also it's warmer weather down here. So,
Yeah.
but it's closer for my family than Hawaii. So it's a compromise. Yeah.
Yes. So I didn't mean to interrupt you. Anyways, you moved
Yeah. So
and
I moved. It was living out of a suitcase for 2 months was exhausting. Staying in, I think I stayed in 8 different like
oh my gosh.
those. I mean, I was exhausted. I still am exhausted actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm grateful that I found this place. And actually, I was going to plant John a memory garden because I like to garden.
Mm,
I was a landscape designer.
okay,
And
cool.
I told him that before he died. And he said, "Oh, that's sad." And I said, "I know it's sad, but I still am going to do it." And he said, "Plant me a Meyer lemon tree." And
Oh,
because that was the very first tree we ever planted at our very first house, we did it together.
okay.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay. And his favorite flower was lobelia. And I thought in my head, I'm going to plant those. And my house ended up being on Lobelia Road,
Oh,
the house that
wow.
I bought. Yeah. And
So
it wasn't like I
special.
bought it because of that. It just ended up being the one I kept coming back to. But it just feels like, God knew or God
Wow.
is aware. Yeah. So it's nice. So,
Mm-hmm. So, so you have friends there because you already knew them. Do you have a church you
yes,
like? Like,
I
what
do
what
have
are
a
your days like?
church.
What do you do?
Yeah, well, right now I've been trying to get my house set up. I only
Yeah.
moved in like a month ago and
Oh,
had
wow.
no furniture. And so I've been running around on Facebook Marketplace and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm finally now to the point where I think my house is set up. So I'm now hopefully going to try to do more like normal fun stuff sometimes, like
Yeah.
get in the water, go to the beach, boogie board, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But, I'm trying to take care of myself by exercising, go to
Oh, that's
yoga,
so
and
good.
French group has been great. We meet once a week and
Now, what does that
um,
mean, a French group?
oh, it's just we speak French
Oh,
conversation
okay.
group. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool.
So we all learn French and then we actually have a teacher who is French. And so, but it's just a great group. We have a lot of different,
Mm-hmm.
interests in common and just to have something every week that you go to and
Yeah.
social is just great. And I started
Yeah.
at Grief Share here a few weeks ago. I
Oh,
started one at our
nice.
church. Yeah.
Good for you.
So, yeah. So,
So I see that you're taking the pain and turning it into something beautiful.
oh,
That,
thank you.
like,
Yeah.
no pain is wasted. Like, God uses everything. And like, you would have never chosen this life, but you're doing good with it,
Yeah.
And so I'm so proud of you. Like,
Oh,
you're not
thank
even six
you.
months in, you're doing, like, you started a grief share.
Yeah.
and you moved, which Mark and I both did. And we talk about, we personally think it's healthy
Yeah.
to move out of the house you were in and go somewhere else. And like, you did all of these big things, and you're in that process of like figuring out, what do you want to do next? It's kind of like
Yeah.
an empty like book now. Your life, you can do anything.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
weird. I mean, I can't see what the future is. It's just
Right.
blank. But I know all I need is like the next step.
Mm-hmm.
Getting this house was the next step. And then, getting it set up was the next step. And I know the next steps will come, but I don't think God wants me to see the whole picture yet.
Right.
And I don't really want to either. But
Yeah.
it's just weird to like have no idea what is going to happen. But just
Yeah.
trust God. It's like really, it brings you closer to God because you're just trusting him.
Yes.
And that's what I did like every step of the way, was because I want his way. I don't want to try and do it myself, because I was
Exactly.
terrified of making the wrong choice with the house and,
Yes.
yeah.
And what do you think has been the most challenging part about being widowed?
Definitely not having him, the person I'd go to for comfort the
Right.
most, not having him. I just want to
Yeah.
talk to him. I want to text him. I mean, I'm like,
Right.
can I just text you once a month? I'm like trying to
Mm-hmm.
anything, that's the hardest part. I want to tell him all this stuff that I did.
Mm-hmm.
I had to change my own locks on the door, and like, look, I did this and it was hard. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
You know what I did for a while? So I had to disconnect his phone because I couldn't afford to just pay for it.
yeah.
But the way that I connected with him is I would send him Facebook messages for a
Oh,
while. And actually my kids did it too for a little bit.
oh, that's nice.
And
Yeah.
it just made it feel like we were saying something to him.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just an idea, like, or whatever. Sometimes I just say it out loud or whatever.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. That for me was just, yeah, like a year person. That's you guys were married. What did you say? 28?
28. Yeah.
28 years. I mean, that's a
Hmm.
long time. And so I'm
Yeah.
sure it's, mine was almost 17 years, and that was a long time. So I'm sure it's hard to get used to that. So what
Yes.
would
Yeah.
you say? I mean, you're a brand new widow, but like, let's say a widow in their first month that might be listening. What advice would you give them?
Just try to connect with other people that are going through what you're going through, because, you know, if you're just going to be around random people who are going to the beach and having fun, you're just going to feel isolated.
Yes.
I mean, you just feel so removed from what their reality is. So try
Mhm.
to, listen to podcasts about it, try to find a grief group, try to find other people who are going through what you're going through. And
Yes.
it really helps. Even if the program, whatever program, isn't, oh, maybe this isn't the right thing for me, just being around the people,
Yes.
and you can support each other, and it just helps, makes such a difference.
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah,
think,
that's
yeah.
great advice. I agree. I mean, that is something that I immediately started getting on Facebook groups and all these things, and just trying to find people. I was just like so hungry to meet somebody else who got it. I actually had like 7 widow friends. I got it already put in my life. And I
Yeah.
called all of them and just wanted to know, does this get better? And like, please tell me it's not going to hurt so bad forever. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what inspired this podcast too. I'm like, I want people to know that. Like, I want them to
Right.
know they're not going to stay in this horrible, horrible place forever.
Yeah.
So you've done a great job of
Thank
doing
you.
that. So what have you picked up any new hobbies or like any new things you like to do as you're figuring out your new world?
Well, I think I'm going to get back into boogie boarding.
Oh, fun.
I have to do like small waves because I have osteoporosis, and my mom is
Okay.
like, don't do it. So, but
Yeah.
I can do small waves. Yeah. And definitely, swimming in the ocean. That was John and I's thing, and, swimming a lot. So it's hard without him, but I definitely want to get back and, be around people that are active and doing the stuff I want to do, and try to
Yeah.
stay young and not, you know what I mean?
Right. Because
I'm interested in that. Yeah.
we don't have a choice what happens to us, but we have a choice what we do with our life afterwards.
Yeah.
And so I have seen the widows who don't get out and don't do all of that. And it's a much harder journey. And
Right.
so I think what you're doing is beautiful. I think you have an inspirational story to just still be what we call baby widow. Anything under a year, we say it's baby. We started the podcast at like less than a year. We're like,
Yeah.
we were just baby widows. I think I was maybe 8 or 9 months out, and he was like, no, I was almost a year because it started in May. And yeah, but anyways, the point is,
Yeah.
like, it's crazy, like how much God can use us in a short amount of time and heal our hearts. Of course, we still have the pain, the hurt, and we have to go through the grief and all of that, but he can heal us so much that we are able to help others. And I think
Yeah.
that's such a beautiful thing. I love seeing that in you. Thank you for not only being willing to come on here today, but to be open and to share like what's helped you. And I know you're going to help other people who are at the same place in their journey as you, to be like, okay, she's doing it, I can do this.
Thank you.
Because
thank you. The thing is that, I can cry anytime. So,
right.
And don't be afraid if tears come, just like,
Yes.
it's okay. They come and I can't control it. And, it's like kind of like a roller coaster. You're doing fine. And then all of a sudden you're sad again. So, but just keep taking the baby steps and
that's right.
surrounding yourself with good people.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. So,
thank you guys.
If you guys like the podcast, give it a little bing, 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. If you take a minute to review it, it's really helpful. We got one the other day about one of our guests, and it actually meant a lot to the guests too. So I sent it to the guests and said, oh, look what someone said about you. So if you want to spend just 30 seconds writing something kind, doesn't have to be about us, it could be about the guests. That would be awesome. It helps get the word out. We really are growing right now. I can't remember how many countries, Mark would probably know, that we're in. We are, another thing I like to talk about is that we are now under the nonprofit Widow Goals. So Widow Goals is a nonprofit I started a little over a year ago, and we do 3 things. We provide podcasts and social media. That's like the main thing that we've been doing before it was a nonprofit. We provide grief recovery classes and scholarships to widows, and we provide local and hopefully one day national events. We'd like to get you all together for a retreat. So if you have been touched by this ministry and you want to give back to a nonprofit, there's a link in the show notes. It goes to help keep the podcast going and all the things that we're doing. So just want to share that. And if you'd like to be a guest, we are loving having guests right now. You can email us at sorry, we just changed it. So I have to remember my muscle memory. Like I always say the same thing for like 80 episodes, but it is widowed too soon at widowgoals.org. It'll be down in the show notes. A really great place to reach out is our Facebook page. If you're not involved, we'd love to have you involved with that. There's a lot going on there with community. You can meet other people. Just search for Widowed Too Soon on Facebook and you'll find our group. So I think that's all the things. And thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.